that all competition is now global. No topic seems to strike terror in the hearts of many managers more than international business. The unknowns just seem to be overwhelming, but the effects of international business are inescapable for every manager of every business of every size. Seventh is the revolution. There is no other way to describe it. There is an absolute revolution going on in the way we make things, store things, ship things, and sell things and services. Some managers have glimpsed a part of the revolution, but very few really grasp its overall significance. Of particular importance is electronic communication. The Internet, for example, that permits the smallest company today to compete on absolutely even terms with the largest company. Lastly, number 8, avoid what I choose to call paralysis by analysis. Develop your own strategic marketing planning system. All of the data and analysis and thinking and questioning you do must come to some kind of closure, and decisions need to be made. Those decisions are the real strategy and plan, but they must be communicated to other people who are going to be responsible for their execution. Don't be like the man who winks at a girl in the dark. He knows what he's doing, but she doesn't. Communicate. Finally, in summary, there are 5 very fundamental factors why marketing planning is absolutely crucial for long-term business success. If you haven't covered all 5 of these points in your business, then the only thing you've got going for you is luck. In case you have forgotten, luck is a fickle partner and sooner or later abandons everyone. Briefly, these 5 are: 1, every manager has 2 sets of responsibilities: managing today's business and managing tomorrow's. Secondly, recognize that tomorrow's business is different. Test the decisions made about future expenditures of time and money. 3, understanding change. Recognize that the only constant in life is change. 4, understand that tomorrow's business is fraught with many variables. Do not ignore dealing with tomorrow's business because you are more comfortable with dealing with the present. And last, 5thly, communicate your chosen direction with a written marketing plan. Everyone in your organization must know your chosen direction. Don't be like Freddie Lakers of the famous Laker Airlines that went bankrupt. Freddie Laker used to make his own notes on pieces of paper on what he wanted the company to do, crumple them up, and throw them in the wastepaper basket, where after he left the office, his managers would come in and go through the wastepaper basket to see what direction he wanted the company to take. I would like to share with you the importance of networking in obtaining crucial information beneficial to successful marketing of your goods and services. A group of people in London sit around a table discussing in great depth what they like and dislike about a consumer product. At the same time, a group of consumers in New York are doing the same thing. This is nothing new. Focus groups, as they are called, are a staple of modern marketing. What is different about this example that I have made is that the consumers in London and New York are connected via video conferencing technology and are actually talking and seeing each other. This is one example of networking as it has now evolved. These aforementioned focus groups are new. The day is fast approaching when they will become the backbone of globalized marketing. The Wall Street Journal quotes an advertising executive who talks about target audiences separated by the miles and cultural differences, but they inhabit similar worlds and have similar needs. In the mid-1980s, I formed an organization we called Advantech. Our purpose was to find several small startup companies, each in different fields, that could network together for mutual benefit. We met regularly in roundtable fashion. Each company had a spokesperson. Turns were taken at each meeting as each company presented their products or services, their marketing plans, their goals, their problems, and their immediate needs. Question and answer periods followed. Information was exchanged. Many of our members began to do business with each other. Now, more sophisticated means are used to network, utilizing the latest technologies. Corning has started its global system called the Business Information Exchange Network with a pilot program. One key feature is a news search service that automatically clips articles and places them in the interested user's electronic mailbox. Digital Equipment launched its competitive information system, also known as CIS, at first to collect and disseminate information about domestic competitors. After 4 years, it became truly global. CIS contains product descriptions, announcements, internal and external competitive analyses, company strategies, policies, and a direct feed from an external news wire. Digital's analysts use data from CIS for strategic decision-making and planning. Its sales representatives use CIS data to formulate sales tactics. The system generates more than 100,000 logins each day worldwide. In conclusion, I say to you that globalized marketing is the great business adventure of our time. Competitive success in the new millennium will depend increasingly on our ability to participate in new world markets as producers and consumers. Developing countries will contribute the major portion of the growth in the world's workforce from 1.5 billion in 1970 to about 2.7 billion by the year 2000. And their prosperity will produce an explosion for the demand of consumer and durable goods. Globalized marketing is competitive, risky, and full of unknowns, which is what makes it exciting. For those who are able to meet the challenges of the global arena, the excitement and the satisfaction of accomplishment will be matched by the rewards in business success. To be a winner, you will want to move ahead, preparing yourself and your organization for doing business in the world. You don't have to do it on your own. Help is available for the asking. You can get rich by succeeding in globalized marketing. If you are in education or government, by being globally competitive, you can also expand your domain of products and services. You can also reach new levels of excellence through shared learning and partnerships never envisioned before. And at the same time, your success is contributing to the peaceful growth, diversity, and survival of the planet and its peoples. I wish you the best of luck, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. We are aware that some of the new receive sites are having problems adjusting their antennas. Thank you very much for your patience. We appreciate all of the effort that you're putting into making sure that the signal is received. Part of this is a learning experience, and we're certain that in subsequent programs we will not have the same problem. But thank you again very much for your patience and all of your hard efforts in making sure that you get our signal. Let's now begin the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax, which now appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first question is from the Instituto Tecnológico de Chetumal, en el estado de Quintana Roo, en México.
Tecnológico in Chetumal, and our first question is, according to your point of view, globalization of our market, our Mexican market, is here now. And what is the percentage of our participation in the market, in the international market, is the Mexican participation? What would you say is the percentage?
Mr. Schultz?
If I understand the question, you're asking what percentage of the market, but I'm assuming you mean the international market or the global market, is Mexico participating in. Regrettably, I would say a very small percentage of the global market. I say it regrettably because Mexico has many great natural resources and products that should be exposed to the world marketplace. I cannot give you an exact percentage, but I would say it is small.
Our next question is from Sabino Morera y Asociados in San Jose, Costa Rica.
From the La Salle University, and the question we have is the following. In Latin America, what predominates is the small enterprise, small business. Our resources are rather scarce. What strategies do you recommend for these countries?
I would like to respond to that. I did emphasize that in my presentation that you have just reviewed or just seen. The answer is Internet. There is one very exciting thing about the Internet as we now have it and see it, and that is that a small enterprise or a small company can now participate in the global marketplace with reasonably low cost and compete against many other very large companies. So that's my one-word response, Internet.
Dr. Chaudron?
I think that it's important, too, to realize that it's not just a matter of using the Internet. What camera am I on? Using the Internet really for marketing's sake. What I really think is important, too, in addition to it, is also to realize that some particular products can actually be sold on the Internet. And I think that you really have to look at both particular aspects of it and also realize, like what you were saying, Stan, that it's important that realizing that the entry cost to sell stuff on the Internet is relatively low compared to a global marketing strategy that might cost many, many millions of dollars.
I agree.
Thank you. Number 4. Our next question is from La Universidad Tecnológico de Nezahualcóyotl, en Nezahualcóyotl, en el Estado de México, México.
Question is, how can we prepare and educate a very deep-rooted culture, a culture that is very deeply rooted in its traditions? How can we prepare something like that for competition in the global markets?
It is extremely important for a company that wishes to participate in a global market or in the global marketplace to realize that it is not sufficient to be bilingual, that you must be bicultural. And the way you become bicultural is, of course, to understand and appreciate that in every country there are different cultures that have to be not only appreciated but recognized. And the answer to that is research, traveling perhaps in that area, in that marketplace, and learning more. I can look back on my own experience and many of the things that I did wrong when I first started as a very young man to participate in international or global events, which I won't elaborate on at this time.
Dr. Chaudron?
I think, too, that the deep-rooted cultural issues is also an important consideration to take into account, because you're really looking at people who may have a questioning or unable to decide on what really they want to do. Part of that reason, I think, is because a clear business case has to be made so that they can change. If all that they're really interested in is, yeah, let's go explore this, maybe we might get something out of it, that's okay. But one really needs to be making a business decision and create a business case for getting into a particular kind of market, and also a particular business case for putting the resources into it really to make it happen. And if there is a clear business case for it, I think that people anywhere are going to realize, regardless of their cultural issues, that there is going to be an advantage to be made and a case to be made for taking advantage of that business issue.
Thank you. Our next question is in English from Servicio Nacional de Aprendizaje Comercial, Porto Alegre, in Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil. Do we have the question?
What? Hello? What? Mr. Schultz, in your opinion, how the crisis in the countries of Asia will affect the current Brazilian economic stabilization program? And what should we do to prepare ourselves if a similar crisis happens over here in Brazil and Latin America?
It is quite evident that we're being greatly affected by what is happening now in Asia. As I alluded to, and I'll try to be brief, in my previous presentation, we were thinking in terms of the millennium being the Japanese century. Now, with the clouds that are hanging over that part of the world, we may now focus upon China, for example. Your question is, how will what is occurring in Asia affect the world marketplace? It has already resulted in better values for the dollar that we have here in the United States. We can buy more product, but the reverse side of the coin is that many of the manufacturers, many of the companies there are not able to obtain the raw materials that they require in order to produce product. So it is one thing to be able to buy the product at a lower price, and another thing for the fact to remain that the product may not be available. What will happen if it occurs in Latin America, if it occurs in Brazil? I would say very much of the same thing. And we all are extremely conscious of this very critical situation today.
Thank you. Our next question is from El Colegio de Bachilleres de Tabasco in Villahermosa, Tabasco, Mexico.
Our question is the following: how can we focus the publicity, the advertising strategy for a product for youths that are in the rural areas and another one that are in the cities?
The key word, again, it would be the availability or access to the various means that are available. There, in the United States, a great deal of the advertising dollar goes into television, but there are still many places in the world today where television is not available. In China, for example, with the largest population in the world, they still rely a great deal on posters that are placed on walls outside of factories and where people gather. So it's a case of finding out what is available in the way of media, be it television. Here again, this is where internet, I think, is going to come to the forefront.
Thank you. Our next question is again from Costa Rica, Sabino Morera y Asociados in San Jose, Costa Rica.
Morning. Dr. Schultz, you said that the free trade favors individual freedoms, but sometimes in the treaties there are differences in size that are very difficult to overcome. For instance, in the treaty between Mexico and Costa Rica, if a Mexican enterprise decides to come and settle in Costa Rica, it has to make a great effort, and it's just as to come and open up a branch in Costa Rica. But for a Costa Rican enterprise to settle and to open up in Mexico, that it means a huge effort, which is establishing a company that is a lot larger than its actual size. What would you recommend for these differences to be solved or overcome?
Well, this is perhaps a legal question more than a marketing question, but there are ways. For example, Colombia basically now is participating in NAFTA because Colombia has a treaty or an agreement with Mexico, and because of that, they're able to use that agreement as a pipeline to enter into the United States and Canadian markets using Mexico's participation in NAFTA. So there are ways that this can be done. It's a political question you're asking me, and it is a convoluted question. It's a difficult question to answer. You need, obviously, to get advice from legal counsel, and it can also be a political matter.
Thank you. Our next question is from la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, la Facultad de Estudios Superiores en Cuautitlán, Estado de México, México.
How do you establish a globalized competition that is equitable and in proportion to everybody if you see that all the countries of the world have very obsolete plants and installations which have a lot, and countries that have a lot of political, social, and economic problems, and they don't have development and strategies for developing their markets. So we have a great abyss, and this is, of course, accepting the group of the 7 countries, the big developed countries.
This is quite a question, and we don't have the time to really explore every facet of that question. But I fall back on what I learned from my father, that to be successful in any enterprise involving marketing, you have to know 3 things. You have to know your product, you have to know your customer, and you have to know yourself. And when I refer to knowing your customer, I would say that means know your market. So the answer, a quick answer to what you're saying, is research and learn a great deal more about how your product could be useful or utilized in another market.
Dr. Chaudron?
And I think, too, that I think you may have also answered your own question. in that you're saying that the infrastructure isn't in place, the legal infrastructure is not there, and that's in essence what one needs to focus on. And that way that not only can you have one organization that's successful, you can have all organizations that are successful as a result.
Thank you. Our next question is from La Universidad Privada Boliviana in Cochabamba, Bolivia.
What are the competitive strategies for small businesses in underdeveloped countries vis-a-vis the globalized world, and what is the role that an underdeveloped country should play within the International Division of Labor?
Oh boy. The traditional answer to that is on any underdeveloped country that they are a source of cheap labor. And that is often why organizations go to those countries, is because they have a relatively cheap labor source for things that don't require a lot of skill. One perhaps can use that as a starting point, but you can't use that as an end point. One must take whatever skills one acquires and decide what level of expertise one wants to get in a more highly value-added aspect of it, pursue that resource, get that resource, and then on that basis then start developing an additional expertise other than just having a lot of cheap hands available.
Thank you. Our next question is from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional, CEC Unidad Morelia, in Morelia, Michoacán, Mexico.
I can't hear. I'm calling from the continuous education from the Politécnico. The question is, there is a lot of interference. What is the environment of the professional within their borders, and how does there is too much interference? The interpreter has absolutely not been able to hear the question. ¿Aló? Adelante. ¿Aló? ¿Aló? ¿Podría repetir la pregunta, por favor? ¿Podría repetir?
You know, unfortunately, that's a major problem in that, you know,
Global panorama in which the professionals are when they are beyond their borders, and how would you locate the information services? What can you tell us in that regard? Thank you.
How do you get marketing?
If I heard part of that
Escuché
question.
parte de esa pregunta.
I think what it is that where do we get their sources for
From the
marketing
set.
information?
Yeah,
I think that's what they're
what I understand is where do we get the sources for the marketing information? I hate to keep beating the same drum, but I would say the internet is a way to obtain sources for marketing information. Research. Remember that you're not an unwelcome guest in a market or a country in which you wish to participate. So the government agencies in these areas can supply you with a great deal of information. Travel to that marketplace. Spend time. Mingle with other business people. The best way to learn about your product in another marketplace is to observe how a similar product is being marketed, domestically and otherwise. Research.
Thank you. Our next question is from the Universidad Autónoma de